Welcome to Fintech Impact. I'm your host, Jason Pereira. Today's show, I have Jason Early, a repeat guest, but this time with a new company. Jason is the founder and CEO of RISR. RISR is a platform for valuating businesses, but also providing insight so that advisors can work collaboratively with their business owner clients to maximize the value of typically their largest asset. And with that, here's my interview with Jason. Jason, thanks for taking the time today.
Absolutely. Great to be here.
So, Jason Early of RISR, tell us about RISR.
Yeah, I'm really excited to be here, Jason, and thank you for everything that you do for the industry and for having me. We started RISR with the belief that owners of private companies need better advice, and those that serve them from an advice perspective need better tools and technology. And so everything we do is about deepening the relationship between the financial advisor, and we use that term pretty broadly, be it financial advisor, banker, accountant, what have you, and the business owners that they serve. And so our platform is designed to help those in the financial services space better engage with owners of private companies.
Excellent. All right. So let's talk about the origin story. How did it come to be?
Yeah, it's really with that belief. So we think that financial advice matters, and we think that it matters a lot to owners of private companies, especially as they get closer to transitions. The demographics today are staggering. There's, call it $8 trillion of assets owned by owners of private companies. They're going to transition in the next several years. And when we think about this space, we know that owners of private companies need advice. We know that advisors want to serve owners of private companies. And for decades, advisors have had the tools and technology to serve an entire household, but they don't have the tools and technology to serve the entire business. And so we think that the reason that you see the statistic that is really staggering, which is 65% of business owners don't have an advisor, that keeps us up at night type statistic. And when we think about that, it's because we believe they don't have the tools and technology. And owners have deeply complex situations, right? They've got their people and their transition plan and their succession plan, risk management, valuation, investments, documents, capital structure. They've got all these things that they're thinking about. And the advisors that serve them don't have anything to pull all that together and enable better advice. And so we've always believed deeply in having an advisor lead the advice process. And our goal is just to enable them to provide better advice to these owners.
It makes sense. To date, or at least historically, the people always pushed advisors or advisors have always been told to target business owners because that's where the money is, right? And there's truth to that. But then the reality is like, how are we meeting them where they are? And traditionally, or more historically, it's been around insurance solutions on buy-sell agreements, or basically tax planning on the investments and money once it's generated. But actual advice surrounding the most valuable asset in their lives, in most cases, has been non-existent in terms of. And then to be fair, we can't be experts in every form of business. I have seen some people specialize in very narrow niches like dentists or doctors and know how to maximize that enterprise value. But in general, it's really, you're not going to be an expert in all businesses. But let's talk about your solution. So you saw this problem. How did you go about trying to solve the problem?
So you're so right on that. And I couldn't agree more. I got a ton of thoughts on this topic. So the first thing I would say, the best advisors do exactly that. It's like the old corny line, which is riches and niches. And they go really deep in one or two particular industries versus being serving all industries, because it's difficult. But how do we solve the problem? So I think the single biggest problem in the space for advisors and working with owners is business owners have disorganized and disparate data. They've got data all over the place and nobody's pulling it all together. Nobody's analyzing it. Nobody's providing insights based on that. And so what we've tried to do on the advisor's behalf is seamlessly pull in all of the data that owners have all over the place. So to pull that in and analyze that data on their behalf and then serve up insights that are interesting. But more importantly, insights that the advisor is comfortable talking about. So to your point, right? If something falls outside of the competency or advisors don't have confidence talking about any one particular area, they're not going to talk about it. And so we need to serve up hyper-relevant insights that the advisors are comfortable talking about and moves the needle for owners. And so we think about it from a data perspective. How can we pull all of this data together, aggregate it, analyze it, and serve up insights based on it? To your point in the question, we think it's critically important for the owner to really better understand their most important asset and to understand, what do I need from this asset and what do I want from this asset, and can those two things match up?
Excellent. Okay, so let's talk about the experience of this from the digital side. So let's look at it from the client side. So I'm a client. I basically am onboarding with an advisor who says he's going to help me maximize my enterprise value. Talk to me about what that experience looks like.
Yeah, so I'll start again with the data aggregation piece. Technology is a beautiful thing today. And so through several deep integrations, through original character recognition or OCR technology, we're able to pull data from tax forms. We're able to integrate through other providers to pull data into our platform. So the advisor, it doesn't fall on the advisor or on the owner. So we pull all of that data into our system. And then through a flow of questioning, right, the owner is going to answer a bunch of questions around their business. And from there, we can generate this dashboard and generate this insights report. And so with very little input from the owner or very little work from the advisor's perspective, we can pull all this data in and ultimately end up on this insights report. But I would say two things on that. The biggest thing that we try and solve is oftentimes owners have an understanding perhaps of what their business is worth and what have you, but they don't understand the impact of that. And so we try and answer what we call the so what question, which is, great, your business is worth 8, 10, 12, 20 million bucks, whatever the reality is. What do you need that business to be worth? So Jason, a $10 million business to you might be very different than a $10 million business to me, meaning it's all based on what your hopes, dreams, goals, and objectives are. And so from an advisor perspective, we're trying to launch the advisor into these conversations that deepens trust and deepens relationships. So if you're able to have that conversation with the owner to say, what do you need this business to be worth based on, like, we understand that to fund your retirement, we need X amount of dollars. We know that you have these weddings you want to pay for. We know that you have these philanthropic goals. Whatever the case might be, your reality today might be different from what you need that business to be worth. So we're trying to highlight that and help the owner understand how to get from where they are today to where they need to be. So what are the levers that they can pull in their business to maximize value? What are the risks that their businesses face that they can mitigate to increase value over time? And help them understand, again, where they are today and where they need to be. Because oftentimes an owner might hear a number and say, that's great. But the reality is that doesn't meet their goals and objectives based on the exercise they've gone through with their advisor. And so, again, everything that we're doing is trying to launch the advisor into the conversations that they want to be having with owners to help them deepen the relationship.
Excellent. So basically, it all gets sucked up, and you're effectively bringing a bit of the core concepts of financial planning to this argument, to this conversation, which is now we have a goal, right? Like at the end of the day, saying your business is worth X or whatever else it is, what do you need it to be? How do you get there? So tell me about the information you're putting in front of the client and the advisor in order to help them determine how they can actually achieve that goal.
Yeah, so this is a great question and one that we think a lot about. And so we are not a retirement income platform. We are not a financial planning software. There are wonderful companies that do all those things out there today. What we do, we stay laser focused on this asset, meaning the business and what this asset means to the owner of the business. And through integrations over time, what we'll do is we'll pass that back and forth with some of those platforms. But today, we help the owner understand, what does the business need to be worth? Meaning, what do they need to generate in terms of income from this asset to meet their overall retirement goals? And through questioning, we help the business owner understand that. And we're doing a time value of money calculation on the back end to generate the gap that exists from this asset. And we've seen results all over the map. Sometimes that gap can be large, but sometimes what we get really excited about is when owners find that they've already achieved it, right? They're already there. Perhaps they've saved enough from cash flow out of the business over time and stocked enough away. Perhaps that gap is small and they realize that in just a couple of years, they can get to where they need to be and achieve their outcomes. And that's what we get most excited about.
Yep. And I will say that sometimes, frankly, it's your baby, the business. And oftentimes, we have this discussion in the podcast more often than once. Everybody thinks their baby's beautiful. And sometimes it just really ain't. And some people, some business owners out of pride, frankly, will not sell their business for anything lower than a certain threshold. So sometimes this is almost a face-saving opportunity for them, is to say, okay, fine, you're telling me that it's worth X. I want it to be worth Y. What do I got to do to get there? Because that's what I think I should be getting, right? However they get there to what the goal is. The point is that now what you're providing them with is not only a pulse check on where they are, but also a system for basically getting them to where they want to be. So talk to me about how you're powering this. You're pulling this information from a lot of sources. Like what's involved in actually coming up with this magic number and these magic benchmarks that you have to hit?
Yeah, certainly. Again, when we think about data aggregation, we're pulling data from all sorts of places, but obviously it's owner dependent and dependent on that business. And so whether it's QuickBooks, whether it's tax returns, whether it's questioning and question flows, because again, we think obviously valuation is important, but beyond that, we want to create the entire visualization dashboard for the owner. And so that includes, be it succession plan, be it capital structure, be it investments, all these other things. We're going to pull data in around all these things and then serve it up to them in a dashboard view where they can see everything about their entire business in one platform. And so for us, data is critically important. Pulling that data in seamlessly is critically important. And so again, leveraging the technology that exists out there to pull that in is super important for us, because what we've seen in the past is left to the advisor or left to the owner, they're just not going to do it. And so to drive adoption, we need to leverage the technology and build technology that takes that off their plate.
All right. Okay. So you've done that. You built the technology, take it off their plate. You've given that. Talk to me about the advisor experience. You're serving up these numbers, but let's say I'm a new advisor coming into this. Got to be a little bit intimidating. I'm, working with my first business owner on this. What are you doing to help provide around what it is I should be doing for them?
Yeah, I think this is a great question. And it goes to the confidence thing, right? So a lot of times advisors, we think that this is why that gap exists, why 65% of owners don't have advisors. So a lot of times advisors aren't confident talking about these things with owners of private companies. And so we do a lot on the education front, right? We want to educate the advisor and give them the confidence to go engage with owners. And so we've got education in the platform, we've got content, we've got videos, we've got training materials to help educate the advisor around why working with business owners makes sense and helping them understand that asset. But we also think a lot about, to your question on user experience and user interface. For us, I think the trap that a lot of companies or people will fall into is getting overly technical in any one area. So be it valuation or succession, or technical things around capital structure and what have you. If in platform we get too technical in any one area, the advisor's not going to be comfortable delivering it. And so we need to, one, educate the advisor, and then two, keep it at a level that they're comfortable delivering advice around. And they might not be an expert in all areas. And so one thing that we think a lot about is who quarterbacks all this. And what we found, and the statistics suggest, that when a financial advisor is engaged, they end up becoming the most trusted advisor. And so they sit at the center of perhaps a legal team, an accounting team, benefits and risk management team, and all sorts of other advisors. So in our platform, we're going to put the advisor at the center of that universe, but help aggregate all those other advisors so that they can go and pull in different information when and where needed. So we view our platform as a collaboration platform amongst all those advisors for the owner. And so we've got a quarterback at the center, but we're pulling in advice and data from all sorts of different areas to help that advisor, one, get comfortable, but two, to remind them that they don't have to be an expert in all areas for the business and they can pull in resources from other places.
I also think the way you framed, like I'm looking at your risk assessment online right now, the way you frame these things, it's not overly intimidating. Like if you started putting things like, oh, your inventory turnover ratios are suboptimal, right? It's like realistically, do I know enough as the advisor about that nature of that business that I can provide any commentary of value whatsoever, right? Telling the advisor that that's suboptimal compared to like pure benchmarks, they can figure that out. Like they understand their business enough. But when you're looking at the things that you have on here, like supplier diversity risk, owner dependency risk, liquidity risk, key employee dependency, practice financial, I don't know what's in financial, customer concentration and leverage. Like these are all pretty straightforward to understand concepts that I think most people, especially business planners who are hopefully running their own practice themselves, can pretty easily understand, right? And I think it's something that's, I think at least you've done something that's non-intimidating to either the advisor or the client in that regard.
No doubt about it. And this comes from our question flow. So we're going to ask the owner a bunch of questions about their business. And this impacts the value of their business, right? What owners often don't understand is it's not just the financial numbers. meaning this same business, right, with the same exact financials and the same exact industry might be valued differently based on some of these questions, right? And so when you look at an income approach or a capitalization of earnings approach when it comes to valuation, the makeup of the business matters and the riskiness of the business matters. That hits the cap rate of that business. And so if you have a tremendously risky business because you've got high owner dependency, you've got high customer concentration risk, you've got one supplier that your business depends on, that's not good for the value of the business. And so you want to de-risk that business by taking steps. And those are levers that you can pull as an owner. And so that risk assessment is obviously, we think, high quality information for the owner, but high impact that the advisor can deliver to the owner by helping them uncover some of those things.
Excellent. Okay. So, all right. So basically, then in addition to just doing that benchmark, you're not just looking at it one time, you're creating trend analysis. So talk to me about how that factors into the conversation.
Yeah, again, over time, we think that certainly businesses change over time as financials change, as customer makeup changes, as markets change, right? Businesses change every day. And so we want to create a place, a dashboard for owners and advisors to collaborate on. And we think that valuation is important. We think that all these things that we've talked about today, succession planning, risk management, capital structure, we think all this stuff is important. And so we want to have this dashboard as a place that owners can come back to and look at their business in one place. Because again, we talked about at the beginning, forever there's been technology for someone to think about the entire household. There's been nothing for the owner of a business to think about their entire business. So for them to be able to come back and update information, and that's going to be constantly happening in the background by some of the integrations or what have you. But then as they update some of these questionnaires or the information flow, they're going to see the updates come through in this dashboard. And so we view it as really like a real-time dashboard for them to manage the entire business and for the advisor to help pull them through and keep them on track. Because again, what today's reality doesn't always match up with what the owner's goals is in a bunch of different areas. And so the advisor's trying to pull them along and help them accomplish all of those things. And that happens over time.
Yep. All right. So besides the evaluation and basically those metrics, what else is your platform doing on behalf of to help basically achieve this goal?
Yeah. So again, what we think about it in totality. So there's an entire, when you think about the demographics, and bear with me here for a second, when you think about the demographics and the amount of businesses that are going to transition over the next bunch of years, every business has different goals and objectives, right? Based on what that owner is trying to accomplish. And so our goal is to help the advisor engage with the business throughout the life cycle of that business. My goals today might be different than my goals 5 years from now, which might be different from my goals 15 years from now, depending on where I'm at. And so we want our platform to help serve the advisor throughout that entire life cycle. And so whether you're planning on exiting your business today as an owner, whether you're planning on growing your business over the next 15 years and then transitioning it to be it employees or a next generation or selling to a third party, or just guess what? Oftentimes a business we say lifestyle business like it's a negative all the time. And that's not always the case, right? I might run my business because I love what I do. I might have saved enough outside of my business that I just shut down one day. And so again, our goal as a platform is to help the advisor to engage with the business regardless of what their goals and objectives are, to help them meet those goals and objectives. And by doing that, it's all about data aggregation, analyzing that data, and helping to serve insights that are important to that owner to help them meet their goals and objectives. And for us, it's all about looking at the business in totality, not just any one aspect.
Yeah, and I think you made a very good point there about lifestyle business almost looked at negatively. It's silly. Don't get me wrong, shutting down a business that could otherwise be sold, this is the foolish thing, right? No one just leaves that kind of money on the table. But running a business that maybe can't be sold because of the dynamics of the industry or the dependence upon the individual, because it's a like executive or knowledge-led business solely by that individual, that is not, at the end of the day, it's there to service the needs of the business owner. And if their lifestyle's paid for it by it, their retirement's paid for by it, so what? Not every company needs to be a large-scale enterprise that gets a massive exit.
Look, the dirty little secret is most businesses don't sell.
Right? 100%. But here's the thing. You said what dirty little secrets most businesses don't sell. But I counterpoint that to say that the reality is that unfortunately it's because the sales conversation is never thought out in the fullness that it should be, right? So oftentimes people just assume they're going to be able to sell something in the future or think it's possible, get to that stage of their lives. And at the end of the day, they haven't worked to create a sellable business. And therefore they just, you know what, I'm not going to put another 5 years into this. I'm done. So it's basically a self-fulfilling prophecy in a lot of ways, in that you don't plan to fail, you fail to plan. If you fail to plan, you plan to fail.
100% agree. I think this goes back to the disorganized and disparate data, right? People are so focused on running their business, they don't step back and spend time on the business. And I know that term's been used a lot, but you should operate your business as if you're in due diligence to sell your business at all times. Meaning, in case someone knocks on the door someday, right? You always want to be prepared to turn everything over and say, here, take a look, right? But 99% of businesses are not, and that creates problems.
Yeah. The time to be ready for that, I can't remember what was the time to be ready for that opportunity was yesterday. At the end of the day, because if it comes tomorrow, you're not going to be ready for it.
Totally agree.
Yeah. All right. So that's where the platform is today. Where do you see it going?
I said that the kind of keep us up at night number is 65% of owners of companies not having an advisor. And so we think a lot about connecting willing buyer, willing seller. And I don't mean that in terms of like buyer and seller of a company, a buyer and seller of advice. So we think a lot about connecting advisors and owners of private companies. Again, we believe deeply in financial advice. We believe deeply that advisors provide immense value and that these owners need advice. And so we think a lot about how to solve that problem. How are we going to bring those two together? I don't have a great answer for you today. I think a lot of people have taken a pass at that in a bunch of different ways. You see it in the general retirement planning or advice market, but we think a lot about that. And so I think over time, our platform one of the goals we'll have is to better, connect those two. Because again, 70% of owners have no succession plan, yet a third of them plan on transitioning in the next 5 years. So who's helping them with that? And we think a lot about solving that from a problem perspective.
I too have a plan to have a six-pack abs, but I eat pizza on a regular basis. Again, express desires versus demonstrated preferences, express preferences versus demonstrated preferences. It's just human behavior. Yeah, we all want to do the thing.
Yep.
We don't all want to do the work. That's the reality.
Yeah.
All right. So before we wrap up, there's 3 questions that I ask everybody on the positive note. And the first one is, if you had one wish or something you could change in your company or the industry as a whole, what would it be? I'm guessing I already know the general topic, but continue.
One thing that if I think about it from an industry perspective, I think that Orion has a study, I think, that out there says only 10% of advisors say they have all the tech that they need. And so I think that the wealth tech market has gotten super crowded. And I think, look, overall, I think that's a great thing. But I think that creating a world in which advisors are getting access to and leveraging all of the technology they need to provide better advice. So for us, I think one thing that I wish that would change in the industry is advisors being perhaps more willing to leverage technology to provide the advice that they need, so that they're not having to do all of the administrative work on the back end. And selfishly, from our perspective, we think about that from a data perspective. So are they leveraging the tech that they need to get the data that they need to provide the advice that they need?
The efficiency piece, I think, is coming. The artificial intelligence systems that I've seen recently are just going to help really crush a lot of that administrative work in the next couple of years. But we'll see how it all pans out. But I'll also say, I think we're going to go back on this point to the entire niches argument, right? I think that there's absolutely general needs that we all have around things like financial planning and around things like asset management and whatnot. But the more you hone in on who your market is, the easier it is to determine which software systems are core to what it is you're doing. And the problem is that you look at the KITSIS map, which at this current rate of expansion will eventually consume the entire world in about a couple of years. The reality is that there's a lot there that can very easily overwhelm. But if you know specifically that, for example, I'm going to cater to manufacturing businesses within the state that I'm in, as just an example, right? Then I can hone in on exactly what softwares are of use, what value proposition is of use, what softwares are of use to deliver that value proposition, and better hone in on it. So I think going back to the entire riches and niches argument, absolutely there is. And it also really helps center everything from your marketing to even your tech decisions.
Couldn't agree more. And I think in the software and technology world, we use the term ICP, or ideal client profile. I think the best advisors are crystal clear on who fits their ideal client profile, and they won't work with people that don't fit that. Because I think over time, that allows them to become experts talk about it in the business owner space for a second, but that allows them to become experts in particular industries. It allows them to be out there where the accidents are happening, right? Being at those specific industry conferences. So if I work with auto dealers exclusively, right? I'm attending the auto dealer conferences. I know all of the associations in and around auto dealers, and I have relationships with them. And so when people ask about who's the best at providing financial advice to business owners, and they're talking to their association, they're saying, oh my gosh, you got to be talking to Jason Pereira because he is the best advisor to auto dealers that we know, right? Like when you go that deep in any one particular industry, you make yourself the de facto provider or purveyor of advice in that space. Because otherwise it's too hard to go too deep, right? If you work with restaurateurs the same way that you work with dentists, the same way that you work with manufacturers, you just can't go deep enough.
No, you're absolutely right. And it's only that you made the point of they probably won't even take on someone outside of that niche. And the answer is, well, absolutely. That makes sense because especially when you get deep into it, people in that niche know other people in that niche, and everybody that you have a limited capacity for how many people you can deal with. So every butt that's taken up, every seat that's taken up by a butt that isn't part of that niche, just is one that could be occupied by someone that is, which is going to be a factor multiplier. So, yeah. Anyway, we went on a practice management rant, but we're good. So, next question I have for you is, what's been the biggest challenge in the company to where it is to date?
Oh gosh, long list, right? Building software is hard. The point we talked about on the Kitsis map, certainly in the wealth tech space, like advisors are overwhelmed, right? The amount of technology, and I think this is a beautiful thing, but the amount of technology that is available to advisors to power and enable their practice is tenfold what it was just a couple of years ago. And so I think that's a great thing. I think that it allows the advisors to be better at what they're best at. And that's ultimately great for the end consumer. The challenge for us, starting companies is hard. Building software is hard. Spreading the gospel is hard. Getting it in front of people is hard. And getting people's attention is hard. And gosh, there's too many things to list in terms of the challenges that we faced. But I think, again, what keeps us excited and gets us out of bed every morning is the opportunity that we have. And again, that the gap between the owners of private companies that need advice and the advisors that serve them is something that we really want to shrink. And we want to help to create deeper relationships between advisors and owners. And we think that there's a ton of different ways to do that. And so we're going to scratch and claw and fight and do everything that we can to do it. But we could be here all day if you want to talk about the challenge.
It's a big topic. All right. So moving on, last question. What excites you the most about what it is you're working on and keeps you getting out of bed in the morning to keep on fighting the good fight?
Yeah, I love this question. I think the thing that excites us the most is, again, I said this at the beginning, I'll say it again. We believe deeply in financial advice, and we think that advisors, and again, I'm using that term super broadly, but anyone providing products and services and financial advice to, in our case, specifically to owners, but to anybody really, we think that's an incredibly noble profession. And for us, enabling better advice is critically important. And so anything that we can do to help create better outcomes for the advisors that we serve and the owners of businesses that they serve is a beautiful thing. And that's what excites us the most. We think that this is just we're able to ride a tremendous tidal wave, which is the demographics of owners transitioning and advisors wanting to serve those owners. I think historically, to your point earlier, advisors, gave business owners the Heisman, thinking their wealth is tied up in businesses, but it's become in vogue to serve businesses because you're seeing businesses transact and businesses exit, and people want to manage those assets. And I think what advisors are finding out is that if you want to be there to manage those assets when they exit, if and when they exit, you damn well better be there providing advice along the way, because if you wait until they transact, you're way too late. And for us, creating deeper relationships between advisors and owners of private companies and everything that we can do in service of that is what excites us.
Excellent. Jason, thank you so much for taking the time. Greatly appreciate it.
Likewise, really enjoyed the conversation, and we'll talk again soon.
Absolutely. So that was my interview with Jason Early of RISR. Hope you enjoyed that. And if you are an advisor looking to advise business owners and actually be able to address the single biggest asset they have and help them grow it, take a look at their platform. As always, if you enjoyed this podcast, please review on Apple Podcasts, SoundCloud, Spotify, wherever you get podcasts. Until next time, take care.
This podcast was brought to you by Woodgate Financial, an award-winning financial planning firm catering to high net worth individuals and their families. To learn more, go to woodgate.com. You can subscribe to this podcast on iTunes, Stitcher, and Google Play, or find more episodes at jasonpereira.ca.